at a developer conference coming to a UX session. I think it's kind of a big deal. And this morning, actually, when Kevin was talking at the keynote, he talked about experience. And I was a little sad he didn't plug us directly, but it was the perfect lead-in for what we're going to talk about. And it may have been the first time at a build keynote I've heard UX or experience or end user stuff mentioned. So it was a really great moment. Let's introduce ourselves. So we've got some background information on our agenda. We're going to look at copilots, design systems, system anatomy, and your two lovely presenters are Kurtis Beavers.
Hey, everyone.
And I'm Rachel. I'm a director of design. I work on AI platform. You are something different. You're a design director.
Yeah. Titles don't make
If someone
any
could tell me the difference, I don't know. But we're both lead teams of designers and researchers. Kurtis works specifically on design systems. I work on Azure AI and all the stuff that comes out of Azure AI from the platform side. So we have kind of different roles, but we're both designers, and we're going to approach the topic from slightly different angles. I'll kick us off, though. So what is a copilot? You heard it maybe 400 times today, but I think it's worth pausing for a second and defining it. Because it's not one size fits all. Like a copilot is actually more of a concept. It's this idea that we can use natural language processing and an LLM with something like GPT-4 to assist people in whatever task that they're doing. And this can be in a really small way or in a really big way. It sort of morphs and changes. Kurtis will get into that. But the definition is a little bit blurry. And is anyone here, since this is a collaborative session, already building a copilot? Or have you already built one? John? Well, you can go to John's talk later. He'll tell you more about that too.
How about thinking about building one? Anyone?
Being asked by the business or some stakeholder or, yeah. So, mostly we talk about architecture and like how would you code that and where would you host it and all that sort of stuff. We're going to talk about the end user experience and sort of the implications there. Quick slide from a quote from Bill, Mr. Bill G. And he's nodding to the fact that, this whole interface is a real shift. It changes not only what we can make, but the way we make it, who we work with, how we deploy it, that sort of full stack implications. We're just getting into it. So what we're going to do is walk you through how inside Microsoft we've been approaching this from at least like a standardization perspective. And then at the end, I'm going to do some sort of like lessons learned, best practices, things that we're noticing pop up with customers. So why is it so different? Like what makes this a big deal? Well, normally in most experiences that we work on, they're fairly linear, right? And we can sort of predict what users are going to do. This is different. So it has a whole new interaction pattern. You basically have a continuously varying set of inputs and outputs that are not predictable. So, from that, it used to be like we could even just wireframe a customer journey. Right now, when someone starts using a copilot, it's sort of like choose your own adventure. We don't know which direction they're going to go in. And the core idea really is that UX that we worked on before copilots was what we think of as deterministic, right? Like we had a desired input, a trigger, and we sort of knew where we wanted them to exit. This is just much more ambiguous. We can think of it more like probabilistic. We kind of know what's going to happen, but it's a really unique journey for each person. So what happens is we have a concept, an emerging concept around a collaborative UX, and you can think of this in two ways. So one is you're collaborating with the user and you're designing experiences along with the user as you go, but then also the way we build things is much, much more collaborative. You're going to be partnering with design and research from the beginning. You're going to be working with new kinds of team members. You're going to be talking to people who are specialists in writing prompts or designing content. It's going to be sort of a whole new construct of who you collaborate with. So to get us started, Kurtis is going to talk about some of the design principles we've been using internally and just walk us through some of the new ideas and the new patterns that are popping up.
Awesome. And so as we think about designing for copilots, we're kind of coming into it at a few different altitudes. So really starting with, I guess I need to take control. One day I will learn how to use Teams. Starting with some of our responsible AI UX principles, we established some core ideas that we think are really important and essential. And having these principles, it allows us to keep in mind what is most important as we're designing an experience. And it also allows us to kind of like solve some arguments because you can use these as a basis for how you're making decisions. One is establishing appropriate trust in the system. LLMs are pretty powerful, amazing things, but they make mistakes. And so it's really important that we help the users kind of understand those limitations as well as capabilities. Help people spot inaccurate or potential harmful content, help people form better inputs. You know, we're all here in the tech world. Probably a lot of people in this room have used ChatGPT or some other LLM. The rest of the world has not. There's a lot of people that haven't. And so like what it takes to actually form a good input and get a good output and what to do with that output and how to think about that output is something that's like really important. So we need to help users understand and use. And so education is a really, we believe, like an essential part of being responsible with how we're integrating LLMs and generative AI in general. As we look at some of these emerging technologies, there's some known capabilities that we think like LLMs are good at. And then we can take those and we can think about, well, okay, how would you apply this to different circumstances and scenarios as you're building out an app? And so, you know, content generation, commanding, Q&A and summaries, collaboration, all of those things. And then really just like thinking about how we build appropriate trust. And appropriate is the key word. Like we as Microsoft, we always say Microsoft runs on trust, but also we need to make sure that people using LLM technology or generative AI, they have appropriate trust, and that they sort of we have some transparency in everything that we do. Put people in the control. Like we want to give the users the ability to steer their way to good outputs. And then accessibility, and this is something that I love about Microsoft is that we really do care about accessibility and making sure that we are building in accessibility in the experiences that we are building and considering it from early stage of development. So as we think about design systems, there's kind of like, what is a design system? And we have some like fairly established definitions of what a design system is in the industry. But as we started to like really dig in to Copilot experiences, we realized it's more than just the buttons and the components. You said something earlier today, I'm trying to remember, I meant to write it down, about how the actual components used to build Copilots is really deceptively simple, right? That's
yeah. So the actual interface is minimalistic, right? But the interaction patterns and the way that the person is experiencing, for example, your brand, through the way they're being talked to, the way that they are interacting with the superficial UX it's just deceptively simple.
And so we've been thinking a lot about like how do we evolve the design system? How do we consider some of these new types of interactions on top of the base design system? By the way, Fluent Design System is kind of what we're building everything on top, all these Copilot experiences on top of. And this is a summary. There's a lot more that goes into all of this, but from a design perspective, this is kind of a summary of the elements that we think about in the design system. There's a UX framework, there's a design language, there are interactions, patterns, and components. Content design becomes super duper important in the education bit, but also in like how you're shaping the meta prompting and the prompt design and the prompt engineering.
Can I add a quick thing? Yeah. So for developers, or if you're not a designer, this might look like another language. For us, this is pretty standard in terms of like from company to company, design system to design system. This is roughly the structure that you're going to see. But the reason we want to share it is that as you approach this, you will need to start thinking systematically, right? Like you're going to be building more than one of these, or maybe at some point you'll be able to use common components. And this is kind of the structure that you'll work within.
Speaking of structure, as we think about like the UX framework that we needed to implement Copilot experiences, we really kind of honed in on a few different like altitudes of work that people need to do. So really there is a few different like experiences that we're designing for. One would be like a immersive full chat experience. We're just interacting with the LLM. Maybe you're brainstorming, maybe you're searching a knowledge base, those kind of things. The other is like a sidecar type of experience where really the app is the star, and whatever the superpowers of the app are, that LLM is there to assist in helping you navigate those superpowers of the app. And then the other is like embedded. So that would be like when the user is acting upon a single piece of UI. Like let's say you're writing a document and they want to adjust a sentence. That would be an appropriate place to be sort of like zero in and focus. So it's really thinking about like how productivity unfolds at different altitudes. I'm going to skip through some of this because I want to make sure I leave enough.
Actually, one slide, because there was a question in the chat that was super relevant from Eduardo. He was asking, with so much talk about copilots and plugins, what's the plan for providing UX consistency and acknowledging different companies' branding elements when integrating copilots? So it's a great question, but the reason I thought it applied here is I would like folks to expand their definition of what a copilot is. So the way that we've implemented it inside of Microsoft 365 and the Office suite and everything is not necessarily the way you will implement it. Think about the core interaction, which is that you're accompanying somebody through a task and you're augmenting their experience with some assistance. So it could be a tiny modal. It could be this like sort of sidecar experience, or it could be a full screen thing. So you wouldn't necessarily need to worry, I guess, about like consistency of branding and elements, because that shell is going to change. You're going to, as a developer and as people who build apps, like you're going to get to play with that the same way you normally do.
That's a really good point. And maybe I missed a little detail. So I work in M365. I'm working on M365 Copilot. There's also GitHub Copilot, and there are other copilots. Like there's a lot of work happening across Microsoft in different areas, and we're coming together and sort of sharing ideas, building ideas. We believe very much in open design. And so even within the company, it's a big company. Oh my gosh, there's so many designers at Microsoft. And
Not
so
enough.
Not enough, but also a lot. Yes, I agree. So like this is kind of our attempt to share some work in progress. I'm definitely sharing a perspective that is M365, but there are other perspectives within Microsoft that I don't want to over-represent because there's some really great thinking as well. So again, there's that assistive pane. There's a video here, but I'm not going to, maybe I'll play it. It's kind of delightful. But really thinking about that input and output, those moments of latency, thinking about a set of composable controls that fit into any type of experience or UI canvas, and really giving users control to steer their way toward good outputs. I'm going to skip forward a little bit. User education is paramount in all of this. And so that's something we believe, like we have a responsibility to foster an understanding of the relationship of both the capabilities and limitations of the LLM. UI notifications, another way that we help users kind of understand that, hey, this output was not generated by a human. It was generated by a probabilistic large language model that sometimes like gets things wrong. And giving that transparency allows the user to be able to steer it towards something that is better.
Even though, Kurtis, you sort of undersold your guidelines, there are different copilots across the company, but I would say this is the set of guidance that everyone is rallying around. So if you go back to the previous screen, just the concept here that they're calling out that you should have an AI notice in your copilot is a pattern. It's a new pattern. It's a pattern we haven't used before. So even if you change the font or the location or whatever, however you decide to implement that, you should have it. And that's really what the takeaway here is, like, look into the patterns that Kurtis is sharing out and sort of figure out how you can apply that to your idea.
Thank you. I'm from the Midwest, and I am like habitually apologetic. It is in my DNA. Prompt suggestions. These are an opportunity. You can, if you use Bing Chat or experience that, these are an opportunity to both give the user a quick sort of click to a prompt that we think will be successful, and also teach them about what might be an interesting prompt. So it's a way to kind of like teach users about capabilities. some instances, the prompt suggestions are being like generated on the fly. Other times, like they're very thoughtfully put in place to educate the user. Encouraging details, those kind of things is one of those teaching things. I'm going to move a little bit quickly because I think some of the Q&A parts of this. Latency. So one of the things we've talked a lot about is that sometimes when you put an input in, it takes like up to 60 seconds to get an output. But that output saves you an hour, right? Like, so when you think about that, like it's totally worth the wait, but we're not used to waiting and we hate waiting. So we're kind of thinking about it as if you play video games, sometimes like that is a moment when it's the level's loading and it's a big level and it's going to be amazing. You're going to be immersed in it for a long time. While you're waiting, that's a moment to educate. This is how you can achieve X, Y, and Z. This is what is happening. And so leaning into latency as an opportunity to educate users, to teach them how to be successful is something we...
That's so optimistic.
What?
Talking about performance issues with a branded moment. I'll get into that part about how to weigh quality versus latency later.
And not every output is actually worth it, right? Like, so it's worth the wait. And so you have to be really careful. We talk about that a lot, like being willing to walk away from something if it's not it doesn't bring transformational value. Adding friction, this is a weird one. Like we as designers, most of what we do is like try to remove friction from the UI. Sometimes we need to slow users down to make sure that they're taking accountability for the output, especially if they're like sharing it with others. And there's kind of just a good example of that. I was on Twitter the other day and like I saw an article that I had already read it, and I hit retweet, and a modal popped up and it said like, hey, do you want to read this first? Are you sure you don't want to click the link? I think that was like great amount of friction that was added. Those are the kind of things we need to consider. Citations, there is using grounding data is a fantastic practice with the LLM. If you don't know what that is, that's a whole nother talk. But like giving the user ability to dig in themselves. Imagine that the user is an English teacher and they want to know, like they want you to cite your work. Feedback, making sure that you have an open channel of communication with your users so that you are learning and you are adjusting. Lots and lots of progress has been made through gathering feedback from users. And then this one's a really big one. I only have a few slides on this, but the language we use around large language models, like we need to be really mindful of that. And the words you use can either be, like we can say, it's magical, right? And then, folks are immediately going to have a different expectation than if you go at it with a little bit more humble and sort of direct language. And so being mindful about those things.
We talk a lot about language as being sort of you're priming your users to understand how this system works and doesn't work. So one of the big things that you'll see is that people think it works like a search engine, or they don't understand that it's an aggregator.
Or a chatbot.
Yeah, and so some of the language that you put on the UI can sort of subtly nudge them towards better understanding. And what you're really doing, though, is you're managing their expectations, right? It's very different to have something hallucinate versus saying, sometimes this fabricates when you ask it something that is on the edge of its understanding, or you got to kind of coach them through this. I've noticed at least like when my kids have started using and playing with ChatGPT, they like sort of immediately understand it and have no issues versus other folks who have maybe used Google since 1998 or 96. I don't know when it was, 91. Who knows? They sort of have an expectation that it works in a certain way. So the language becomes critically important. If you have not hired a content designer, know what a content designer is, or understand that it's a specialty, like do that after this talk. Go look that up and sort of like consider adding someone like that to your payroll if it's not something you know how to do.
100%. Yeah. And actually, I'm going to bring up a point from the chat that James T, who reports to Rachel, brings up is a good thing to keep in mind is that Copilot UX doesn't always mean chat. Like conversational UX doesn't always mean chat. Collaborative UX doesn't always mean chat. Sometimes it just means inputs and outputs. And so there are some different ways that you can form that UI around the experience. A couple quick sort of samples of what we mean when we talk. These are some of our best practices from our content guidance. Avoid humanizing the AI. Question about like, is it okay to use AI? And so, or is it okay to use I? Is it okay that it speaks of itself in first person? And there's some trade-offs that we're constantly working through when it comes to that stuff. I won't go into too much detail. And then before we get into the next section, this is a bit of a plug. We are building on Fluent 2. So that's the design system that all this is kind of being built on. And then we're eventually going to release some of our guidance for this work more broadly. That's the aspiration. We are also being a little bit like humble and careful because we're testing things with customers, and we want to make sure that things that we put out there from a system standpoint actually like do good. And so that's something that's coming. All of this is like super exciting. It's humbling and comes with a sort of significant amount of responsibility. And so as you're thinking about that with Copilot, those are things that you can think about. And then so Q&A session later if you're interested, and then moving on to, I will pass it back.
Okay, I get to take control. I was thinking Janet Jackson at this moment. Okay, so in practice, so this is, I'm going to switch over a little bit out of the like design systems theory and practice stuff over to what I have seen in, so I work on AI platform. And what that means is I work in that space where like OpenAI and cognitive services and Azure ML, where we interface, where all the tooling that y'all use to make stuff. And so I get to see firsthand customers, trying stuff out, having pain points. So I got like 3 sort of takeaways from people who are in their early ages of making a Copilot, and I thought I'd share those with you. And the reason I wanted to share them is that we know this, and I'm pretty sure you know it, but the UI is not the UX, right? So if you want to make a great AI experience, you really have to be thoughtful about your full stack. You have to be thoughtful about your architecture, your infrastructure, because all of those things add up to the end user experience, and the decisions that you're making, in those sort of like early architecture conversations have real, I don't want to say consequences, but implications for the end user experience. Think about it like this. So when you're picking on your data pipeline, which model you're using, how are you going to handle compute, and where and how are you crafting your prompts? Those translate to the end user in terms of trust, accuracy, the performance, or even just the usability of the system. And so every time you're making a decision like that, you do sort of need to think through what the implications are. This is straight out of the keynote today. This is the Copilot stack. I put those same sort of metrics that you can think of from an end user's perspective and where you would be influencing them based on your selection. So, for example, where you choose to host your solution can really affect the performance. Which model you pick and how you train that model is going to change the accuracy and the groundedness. How you do content safety, what services you pick to do content safety, how you write your prompts will completely change the way that the user interacts and feels trust with that system. And then lastly, usability around just like, which plugins are you picking, and did you pick the right one to answer the right scenario in the question? And I really love what Scott said today, though. He's like, you can build all this stuff, but you still need to make sure you're making a great product, right? Like, are you really answering the question? Are you answering with a solution that your customer needs? And so lastly, the prompt design side of this is super important. We're moving away, like as UI and UX kind of consolidates down into a relatively recognizable language across platforms. The way that your chat interface talks to the user is your brand, right? So imagine that you're going to create a Copilot and you're making your Copilot. Let's say your client is Red Bull, right? You're going to make a Red Bull chat. And that chat is going to look really, really different than like the IKEA chat or assistant, right? And how are you going to really craft the prompts to answer the questions in a way that feels on brand? This is where I say like bringing in a writer and understanding sort of how that prompt engineering translates to the experience is super important.
If I could just add that to that, when it comes to prompt engineering and prompt design or whatever the heck you call it, I think it's really important that designers understand the prompt engineering and that engineers understand it, and that there's like kind of it's like and PMs and everybody else like kind of need to understand how that's working, and that's a whole new dynamic.
Which is like such a nice setup for this slide. No, it's great. So the collaboration model, you're going to be working with new people, or you're going to be bringing in new team members. I would really encourage you to partner with your design and research counterparts from the beginning when you're like going through those architectural choices, or even on which training data set to use. Like, understanding the scenario will help you there. So if you want to learn more about this, I want to plug John here's talk coming up later in the day. He's going to talk more about some of the choices that you make in the collaboration models that you have in the development team. I think that's 4:45 or something like that. And then my last thing, this is sort of like a last best practice that we're seeing pop up. So in traditional application development, you do a lot of user research, sort of like at the very beginning where you're trying to figure out, is this the right thing to build? And then you'll do a bunch of usability that says, we call it validative research. You're like saying, oh, does it work, right? That's going to shift, because basically you have to ship something that you don't really know how it's going to work in the wild. And you have to anticipate and plan ahead for how are you going to do continuous feedback. I think earlier you showed sort of like the feedback modal where someone could put that information in. How, for example, are you going to get that information woven back into your architecture, your experience, or the prompts that you've written already? So start thinking a little bit about that. It might change the way you deploy. It might change your ship cadence, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, and if I could just add one note, like it's continuous feedback loop, but it's also rapid. Yeah. Like there's a lot of changes in the models that come out. You're learning constantly. The pace of all of this is, and the physics is an interesting thing.
Yeah. So the takeaway is copilots, they change a lot of things in the way we work, the way we think about all these things. I'm excited for you guys to get started and sort of see where this goes. Be adventurous, and you will be the experts soon. So there's a couple questions in the chat, but maybe we should take some from the room too while I sort through those.
Sure. Anyone? Okay.
So one of the things you said that really resonates with me is the UI is deceptively simple, right? So I've built some Copilot type of stuff, and the devil's really in the details. Like you got the async nature, you got the citations, you got previews of things, you got almost like IntelliSense type of pick this document. Is there going to be anything coming from Microsoft that helps us with that side of things in different types of apps, whether it's mobile, web, Windows?
Those are things we're working on, and we would love to publish at some point. I think we're working on it. So we want to be careful about publishing things while we're like, testing and iterating. And so yes, the answer is yes. When? I'm not gonna answer that part.
I'm going to take one from the chat. This was from earlier. Someone was asking, can an LLM be given the role of a specific type of user for the purpose of usability testing of a design? The answer is sure. We already use GPT-4 to test GPT 3.5, so I think it's sort of a natural extension of that. Can it be trusted? In general, I think this is a principle here. When you're working with copilots or chats or LLMs, they're really good at summarizing and aggregating and giving you sort of the gist. They're really bad at being experts. They're great at being mediocre, right? Or being in the median. So I would not be able to replace a user researcher doing analysis of how usable something is, but they could definitely use, GPT in some way to help them do summarization, or like feed in 100 transcripts from user interviews and get kind of a sentiment analysis. That's totally possible, but it doesn't take away the sort of like, it can't replace the expertise to make a decision. Another one from the room?
I think you had your hand up earlier.
So from an enterprise perspective, I think all teams, every functional team is used to having these applications, which now we could consider to be legacy applications with buttons and drop downs. And now we have this whole shift towards generative AI, conversational AI, which aptly is getting called a copilot because it is sort of augmenting the main application, which is running in the background. Do you see that the dependency on the copilot would be more than the actual application at some point of time?
I've thought about this many times when I lay awake at night staring at the ceiling. I do think that, like, right now, a lot of what we're doing is integrating these features into existing products in ways that we think are the most natural fit. It's a great question to ask. At some point, will you be integrating those product features into a copilot? I think that, you know, as models get more and more capable, as all of this develops, that's a really sort of reasonable conclusion. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I can give you a quick anecdote. So I was working on a piece of a feature the other day, and it's kind of a really standard feature in tooling, which is show me a long list of things. And the scenario was, I want to find the most recent 3 things that happened. And, you know, normally when you approach the UX of that, you would do a sort by date, right? Or a search. Well, we have a copilot there. In a copilot, if you can just say, show me the last 3 things that failed. And so as we're like going through that, it was like, do we need the page anymore? Not really. So I wouldn't be surprised as you're working with stakeholders to have some uncomfortable conversations about, do we need this feature? Do we need the product? Like, I don't, you know, like, it can be quite disruptive when you start tapping into how powerful some of these things can be. Yeah. I'm gonna take one from the audience and I'll jump back online.
So I had a question when you talked about the importance of the content writer related to generating prompts. So what's the balance of when you ask GPT or the model to respond in a particular tone or style? Having built chatbots before, I think there's a balance between, is that content writer, is the intent that they provide enough prompts to train the model to respond in a particular way? Or are we falling back into the, I'm going to try to control all the interactions? Because I'd worry about, on the controlled interactions, it might have the voice of that content writer, but once it's out of bounds of what they anticipated, which happens often, it then go into a different voice. So how are you approaching that?
I think I might be able to get this one. I think it depends, right? Like, so it depends on what you're building and what the intent of it is. If you know, if you're building a copilot for creative writing, right? Like, you don't want to control you want to give more sort of creative freedom. If you are, you know, answering Q&A, technical Q&A, you probably want to somewhat control the voice. And so it just depends.
I would say also be open to the idea that sometimes I think we're kind of over engineering and overbuilding these. A lot of times folks say, I want a copilot, I want a chatbot, and they're really saying, I would like to do some Q&A on top of a data set. You don't need GPT-4 to do that. And so you think a little bit about what the desired outcome is for your scenario, because you might be over making the thing. Yeah.
I see a question in the chat. With the continuous feedback model, is there concern for losing customer trust in Copilot if the experience doesn't align with their expectation and their first user experience? Do you find that customers tend to be more forgiving and acknowledge in AI limitations?
Take it.
You want me to take this one? I was trying to set you up with a hard question. I think, you know, customer trust is really important. And so there's a reason why a lot of the things that we're doing very careful rollouts with customers that know that we are testing features and with this feedback loop with them. So much of it is framing, and so much of it is like measuring when an experience gets to a delightful moment and when it is subpar. And so I think
this is an expectation management problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is where that content designer can really help you in the framing up of the feature. I love some of the language we use in a few copilots where it's like, we can help you out. We don't always get it right, but we can try. Right? That's a very different message than like, tell me what to do and I'll do it perfectly.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah.
So we have some research that's pretty interesting. if you go with a normal feature, you find that people who understand a lot about how things work will, if it fails, they'll say, well, it failed. And people who don't understand much about how it worked will say, well, I failed, right? They'll blame themselves. But with a lot of this AI stuff, we tend to see the opposite. So that a person with, you have to have sophisticated knowledge to understand that I didn't ask it enough. And interestingly, usually when you're looking at a search, right, we all know to be really parsimonious. And with this stuff, actually writing longer works, right? A lot of things are opposite. So everybody's going to need kind of retraining about how to do it. But they're, yeah, it's different. But people who don't know how it works will not know how to figure out how to make it work.
And I should have introduced Lynn. She's one of our user researchers on AI platform. So, yeah.
One more from the audience. That's a great question. And maybe I could frame, again, like we're building Copilot into different Microsoft software. And so that's our principle, an example of our principle. And we believe that we don't want people to necessarily feel like have an emotional attachment to the Copilot and over sort of attribute certain like human features to it. If you're building, what is it, character.ai?
Yeah, this is also a brand. This is partly a brand choice and
Yeah.
partly a psychological and or scenario choice. So for our products, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
So we were in all of this. We're sort of sharing our principles. You kind of have to look at it through the lens of whatever you're doing, whatever you're building. They might not be the same. Yeah.
No, and you're welcome to name your,
Yep.
Copilot an unthreatening women's name that ends in A, if you want. But like you do, but it's a brand choice. Like you're making real experience choices in some of those small things.
Yeah.
Any other big burning questions? Yes.
Follow up on that. Is part of the dehumanizing, if you look at hallucinations, other issues with currently not having full confidence in people overestimating that I'm talking to a human, to help kind of ratchet that back a little bit to set expectations properly.
Yeah, and actually there's a lot of inner conversations around even just the word hallucination and feeling like that's too close to a human phenomenon. So we've been kind of moving towards the word fabrication as being something that's more accurate and less kind of ableist.
It's either fabrication or bullshit, and we
Yeah.
haven't quite landed that one.
You talked about a more probabilistic approach to interactions. How do you think about mapping out user scenarios when the options feel very infinite?
Yeah, I can kind of talk about
You should
this.
talk.
So one of
take
the
this
things
hard
that
one.
you should think about when you're designing with large language models is that your job as the designer or the product designer is to put restrictions on the system. It's a different way. Usually when you design, you think you're crafting, you're creating something. In this case, you're taking something that's really big and powerful and kind of out of control, and you're trying to put it in a lane, right? And so like when I say probabilistic, what you're doing is you're eliminating some of the like unusual options that might happen. So you're writing a series of guardrail kinds of prompts that narrow down the possibilities, which is just an unusual thing. Normally when we design, we're very excited about like, what could we do? What could we do? What could we do? You sort of have to flip that on its head when you're working with these, because what you're trying to do is maybe not have those side quests happen.
And another sort of like element of that is like giving the user controls. And once you have an understanding of like, you ask it to do something, it doesn't quite do the thing you want. How do you steer it to get to the place that you want? And often the interactions are multiple turns, right? You don't always get like, give me a rap song about design systems. Like that's not a good enough prompt. I've got to add more details to it before I get like something amazing. And so that ability to,
West Coast.
yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, we're basically at time. If there's any other like super urgent questions on the chat, I think we'll wrap it up. We've got one more very
One more?
enthusiastic person. And I'm happy to go back through the chat and answer these in offline.
Harold work on Copilot in GitHub and VS Code. So I think one interesting problem we see is the whole chat side panel is a very new UI, and you have to change your workflow, you have to adopt it. So it's a big barrier. And I think part of it is that text itself doesn't provide any affordance. Like probably just said, like how do I phrase what I wanted to do? Does it know about the last 3 things I had opened? Does it know about the things it run against? So how do you think, like in the future, I think that's a big evolution that has to happen, right?
That's a hard conversation because it was related to cost. So this is where, like when I say the architecture matters for the experience, if you have infinite funds and you're going to have like a, 100-turn conversation stored in memory, that's awesome. Most of us can't do that. Then there's a bunch of trade-offs that you're going to have to make and to figure out. And that's where sort of like the research and the usability side comes in. It's like, how much can you pare down latency, performance, responsiveness, groundedness, and have the kind of cost that you're willing to, how does that all balance out? That's really, there's still a lot to learn there. We're still building tooling, to sort of help people sort through that. Because you could make the most amazing Copilot in the world, but it's gigantic and slow. So yeah, it's a good question. It's a hard one to answer. I wouldn't say that there's best practices. Yeah. Okay.
Last question, John.
John.
I just noticed this room is standing room only. Maybe next year there'll need to be a bigger room, do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a, I will just say this, like what we've noticed in Microsoft is that the new feature team has new faces, right? There's different people in the room in terms of who needs to be there to make a great thing. And so I do think we're going to see sort of a different spread of topics and of interest points at Build next year, I bet. So we'll see. Yeah, but thanks for coming. Thanks for being interested in design and research. And
Yeah, thank you all.